You Only Live Twice is Bond's first excursion into the completely silly, the final transformation of the franchise from tidy spy thriller to obnoxious cartoony spectacle. Here, right here, is where the franchise lost its way. You Only Live Twice is also a film that often gets high praise as one of the series' best, though I've honestly never understood why. Just about every element that gets called out as great was something I found lacking, and it always seemed to me that because Connery was still Bond, people still cheered, but the simple truth is that everything that usually gets blamed on Roger Moore is present here. The pre-title has some kitschy space effects and an American space capsule swallowed by and stolen by an unknown somebody. We cut to a conference where America, Russia, and for some reason England are meeting, just the three at these big oak desks and these big golf balls. They're meeting solely for America to blame Russia for the spacecraft's disappearance. Russia, of course, denies they stole it, but America thinks Russia is lying, and England, who, seriously, why the fuck is England here? Well, they're the only ones that don't sound stupid out of the three, and they bring up that the craft that swallowed the American spaceship may have caused an anomalous blip on the radar over the Sea of Japan, and they suggest that they look with their intelligence for something there. So, as always, the American government sends trusty Felix Leiter to investigate with Bond, and oh, no, America has to be a whiny little bitch in this movie. So, they just keep blaming Russia to service the plot. England, who has no space program, I'm pretty sure, decides just to be friendly to put their agent in Hong Kong on the case and send him over to Japan. Well, that agent is Bond, of course, and he's having just the oddest conversation with the Chinese chick he just got done sexting, and she gets up and then hits this button and flips the bed into the wall and has some random guys run in and shoot the bed with Bond on it or crushed in the wall, and then the police arrive and they pronounce Bond dead. It's completely illogical, the whole shooting the bed thing, since the point of all of this ends up being to fake Bond's death. The only reason to go through this rigmarole is to trick the audience into thinking he's dead, but the audience isn't going to buy it because it's all happening before the fucking title has come up, and there's like an hour and 40 minutes to go, and they know that, so it's just this weird, flashy stunt. So, is any of this pre-title bullshit bad? No, not really. It's goofy and cartoony, but it's not necessarily terrible. I just bring it up because I have read many reviews and articles that put all of this sort of tacky shit as the folly of the Roger Moore era of films. It was all here in You Only Live Twice. So we get this pretty rockin' scene where Bond is buried at sea and brought to M's submarine by divers. We get the slim excuse that Bond's death was faked in the hopes that his enemies would back off while he was sent on a super ninja's important fucking assignment, and that mission is to find out who stole the US spacecraft. So Bond is in Japan. It's a nice change. He goes to a sumo wrestling match solely to show off a sumo wrestling match, and then he meets a Key who helps him talk to his contact for Japan, Henderson. Henderson is played by a Rocky Horror Picture Show narrator and future Blofeld Charles Gray, and he really has a great scene with Bond where they discuss Japan. Henderson is killed abruptly, and Bond plays his way into the office of eventual baddie Mr. Osato, and he eventually meets Japan's head intelligence guy and new friend, Tiger Tanaka. All of this stuff is pretty solid. There's a good fight at Osato Industries' office, some fun stuff with Tanaka, and he's a really great character, and some amazing Ken Adams sets. All good Bond stuff. We get some balls-out, fun, sexist crap with Bond and Tanaka being bathed by Japanese chicks who, according to Tanaka, come second in Japan. So actually presenting it as cultural sexism makes it less awkward somehow than Bond just trying to force himself on chicks. So, through all of the fun, Bond and Tanaka start to piece together the plot, which is, at the very least, presented better than the plot in Thunderball was. So after talking with Tanaka, Bond goes to Osato Industries. Bond is pretending to buy supplies from the company, but he doesn't get any more information from them, so there really isn't much of a reason for him to be here. It's mainly to show off the cool sets and introduce unmemorable villains like Mr. Osato and his secretary, who's like a Spectre agent eventually. This is the Bond film where a lot of the action is put in the film for the sake of having action. Even the shoddy Thunderball had most of its lackluster action arrive related to the plot. You Only Live Twice has Bond getting into situations solely to show off something or other. He investigates a ship, which leads to a prolonged fight, but he didn't need to really investigate the ship since he was pretty sure Osato Industries had been shipping rocket fuel somewhere. Tiger knew where the ship was, so the only reason for any of this is to throw in some action. At least it clips along a bit better than Thunderball. Though Connery is looking a bit soft, and it's hard to take him seriously kicking all this ass at the dock. Bond is eventually captured by Osato and spends some time with his assistant, and then there's a brief scene where Bond tries to bribe the assistant, which leads to premarital relations. But it's another fluff scene since she inexplicably leads Bond along until they are on a plane, traps him, smoke grenades him, and jumps out of the plane. You'd think Bond would have thought something was up, because she's obviously wearing a fucking parachute. This is another moment of excess for the sake of excess, with some neat stuff, but it's all pointless. She could have just killed Bond when she captured him, instead of wasting a plane for no reason. There's also this is also where Connery starts to look bored in the role, doing nothing worth noting in the film. Q shows up, brings Little Nelly a mini helicopter that is quite cool, though it's used in a rather lackluster aerial scene. The Little Nelly scene is a little more than a quick run-through of its features. Q says it's got machine guns and rockets and whatnot, and they all get used one by one on random cartoony bad guy helicopters. These helicopters, of which like an entire squadron is destroyed by Bond, they don't even seem to register with the bad guy, Blofeld, of the film. You think Blofeld would take, I don't know, extra precautions after his entire squadron of helicopters were destroyed by one man, you know, put some guards outside the fucking volcano or something, but I don't know. The whole scene is kind of inorganic to the story. I wish, honestly, Q hadn't explained what the weapons on Little Nelly did, because then it would at least be a surprise. So Russia fires its rocket into orbit, and it's captured as the American one was. Shouldn't this tell both countries that it's not either of them? This time we see the big capsule eating the ship, and it flips and returns to its base, and probably landing in Blofeld's really fucking amazing volcano lair. America is, of course, blamed by Russia, and there's this really stupid justifying scene where America blames the Russians for shooting down their own rocket, and it doesn't make any sense. But the film tries to make the audience think it does. And you know, the plot falls apart if you even attempt to think about it, and that's by far the film's biggest problem. Up until now, Bond films have all had pretty solid plots, even if the pacing dragged or the 60s aesthetic overwhelmed. Eventually, it's explained that the nefarious Blofeld is secretly sending these capsule-eating rockets into space to piss off America and Russia and pit them against each other in nuclear war, so Spectre can rise from the collective ashes. And what? Why wouldn't one side win? Why would Blofeld locate himself in Japan between Russia and America if he wants them to destroy each other? The truth is, just like the rest of the film, the plot is an excuse for the volcano lair, for the space scenes, for Bond's trip to Japan. And as far as excuses go, this one is not so compelling. So anyway, we get our first glimpse of Blofeld, who has pet piranha fish, which he uses on number 11, Asato's assistant, for failing to kill Bond. First, though, he asks her and Osato about the picture of Bond's gun, the Walther PPK, and Blofeld says, only one person we know uses this gun, meaning Bond, but I don't think that's right at all, that only Bond uses the gun. I kind of thought it was implied in Dr. No that all the 00s were getting these. So after Bond's fun with Little Nelly, any of the decent bits presented in the first half of the film get flushed away, and You Only Live Twice shifts to full-bore fucking absurd. Bond flies in from somewhere to Tiger Tanaka's fucking secret Ninja Island, where Tanaka shows Bond his ninja training facility, an excuse for swords and throwing star scenes, and then Tiger introduces some modern ninjas with guns and rocket guns. Tanaka explains his plan is to attack with a force of 100 ninjas, and Bond must disguise himself as a Japanese man, and pose as a poor fisherman, and take a wife for what Tiger calls hilariously extra special cover. Now, once the big, hairy, Scottish Sean Connery gets a wig and some eye prosthetics to be made up to look Japanese, the film totally tosses its fucking cookies and pretty much is lost right there. Connery is absolutely laughable in the getup. Tiger tells Bond his soon-to-be wife he says she has the face of a pig, which Bond is very horrified by. Aki, Tiger's assistant, is killed really for no reason at all, and Bond spends like 4 days training to be a ninja, which comes in handy for like 3 seconds later in the film when Bond throws a ninja star. Other than that, it's fucking useless. So Bond has to go through this terribly long wedding scene where he waits for his bride, Kissy, and Bond has turned Japanese at this point, and they're going through this whole wedding, and I guess they've left the Ninja Island and are near the volcano fortress and worried that Blofeld's spies are watching them, and I don't think the movie ever implies that Blofeld's men are watching the village, meaning there isn't much of a reason for Bond to pretend to be a fisherman at all, and if he looks so awkward, it actually makes more sense for Tiger Tanaka or one of his men to do all this instead of making Bond do it. Hell, Tiger's there anyway. So Bond is getting married, and there's this terrible joke where Bond keeps looking at Japanese women who are part of the wedding ceremony and worrying they might be his wife. None of these women are terribly ugly, even if they were the whole face of a pig thing would have come off mean anyway. It ends up being that Bond's wife is hot, so everything's cool. Bond goes undercover for really no reason, and the movie really just drags through all this stuff, eventually getting Bond up to Blofeld's volcano lair. Casey goes swimming to get Tiger to bring him back, but you don't really care. And the Americans launch another rocket to do unexplained things in space, and they actually think that the rocket will be captured, so they're just wasting lives here. So Bond suction cups his way into Blofeld's and lets the captured astronauts out of their cell. Luckily, Blofeld only armed the cell guards with batons instead of guns. Blofeld is waiting for his own astronauts to go load into the captured Russian capsule, presumably to precipitate war. And I guess the idea here is that the American, astronauts in space will recognize that this is a Russian capsule, but the American government's pretty hell-bent on going to war with Russia even if they don't recognize it, so whatevs. So the captured astronauts beat up one of Blofeld's astronauts and dress Bond in his gear, similarly to before, where Bond was completely surrounded by Japanese intelligence people and the movie insisted Bond be the Japanese guy undercover. Now the movie surrounds Bond with astronauts and insists he be the one to pretend to be Blofeld's astronaut. The movie also rather goofily gets the audience to anticipate that Bond might go into space. Bond, of course, does not, which honestly always gets me, because he almost gets there. He gets into the fucking rocket, and instead he just gets caught for doing something that one of the American or Russian astronauts would not have done. So Bond is captured, and the franchise will wait another 12 years before James Bond makes it to space. Bond is brought to Blofeld, and his face is finally revealed to be the same guy who went blind in a Nazi POW camp while hunting Michael Myers. Donald Pleasance is revealed as Blofeld, and the look of Pleasance in the role with the scar on his eye and the jumpsuit is certainly classic. It's nice to finally see the face of Bond's most famous nemesis. Now, I love Donald Pleasance and all. I mean, he's a fucking president in Escape from New York. But he's far too genial an actor to play the part of Bond's most sinister enemy. He has no menace at all, no depth, just aesthetics. He looks tiny, and the way he moves is completely unthreatening. You could argue that his aloofness or his lack of looking sinister makes him a creepy villain in a Hannibal Lecter sort of way, but again, Hannibal Lecter has intensity. Blofeld has really never put forth a great plan or shown true intelligence as a villain in these movies at all. He just approves other people's plans. He's the leader, but in his previous incarnations, his booming voice gave him an appeal that showing him could never bring. I find Pleasance's Blofeld, Bond's most iconic fucking nemesis, to be the weakest villain Bond faces throughout the 60s. So as the Gagla ninjas descend into Blofeld's volcano lair, I definitely got the sinking feeling that the Bond franchise lost its way. So there's a big epic finale and all that jazz, but it ends like all the other Bond films, so let me go right into the finale of this whole review. Bond films tend to lend their plots to some fad or thing that was big at the time of their creation, and Russia and America's space program were pretty topical. Ian Fleming's book gets thoroughly raped in getting to the screen here, far more than any previous Bond film, though Dr. No is close, and actually both films have the space program crammed into them. And the movies are all filmed out of order, so You Only Live Twice as the novel ends the Blofeld trilogy of stories where Blofeld will return a few more times in the films. You Only Live Twice really just is a Bond film that doesn't work for me. It's not really terrible. It's lacking in the simplest of ways. I'm pretty cool with silly plots and excessive action. Hell, that's the hallmark of the series. It's just that in You Only Live Twice, the plot and action are sort of half-assed together, leaving you with a film that has a lot of memorable images, but little else. This gets me to my final point on this particularly long-ass review, which is why the hell is this film so beloved? Those people that remember it must just really remember the kick-ass volcano lair or something. The beginning is good stuff. With Henderson and Tiger, it's great, and even when the film turns to the dorky with Bond as a Japanese man, it's not really terrible, even if it drags a bit. The movie isn't really that bad, it's just nowhere near the classic it's supposed to be. This is the James Bond film where the series reached its breaking point. On Connery's watch, not on Roger Moore's.